yesterday you said that in the last, I think it was 20 or 30 years, the standard of living for 80% of this country has been either stagnant or declining. And today you said that the powerful know what is going on. Do you think that all of the 20% at the top understand what is going on, the big picture that you present in your books? And if not, is there any hope that a significant portion of those people can learn what is going on and develop a conscience and join with those who are trying to change things?
Well, you know, I can't say everybody knows what's going on, but it's like what I was just what you just described is completely open and public. I mean, I'm not giving you any news. You know, this is all over the newspapers. If you want real details, I mean, the place to look for details is every 2 years there's a big study that comes out called State of Working America. The edition for 1996 just came out. I think it's called 1996, 97. It's edited by Lawrence Michel and Jared Bernstein, a couple of others. And that's like a huge statistical compendium that has all of this data in it if you really want it. But this basic story is known by everyone. You can read it. I mean, it's known by anyone who wants to bother to know. I mean, maybe you don't want to bother to know. But it's all perfectly public information, right in the mainstream, you know, completely obvious. It's not interpreted the way I interpreted it. It's interpreted as the mysterious workings of you know, the market and its wisdom and so on and so forth. I mean, there's all kind of phrases for it. There's nothing much to do with the market. It's very definite social policy. Do the people who are involved know what they're doing? Well, I mean, of course they do. Take, say, Newt Gingrich this morning, okay? This morning you read the newspapers, I mean, even USA Today, you know, I happen to pick up USA Today in the hotel, you know, place where they serve coffee. So there's an editorial. USA Today is not a big radical rag. Okay? They have an editorial pointing out the obvious, you know, the obvious. I mean, to anybody who has one gray cell functioning. Newt Gingrich made a speech yesterday in which he called for cutting off capital gains taxes and estate taxes. Well, who benefits by eliminating capital gains taxes and estate taxes? Well, the top 1% of the population, overwhelmingly. Then, you know, tiny effect going down. I mean, the editors of USA Today are perfectly aware of that. They're also aware, they may not, if they're aware of it, they didn't say it, but they may not be. They say, well, Gingrich also has a statement in which he says, well, this is really important because that'll free up more funds for investment. Well, you know, I don't know if he reads like exotic journals like Business Week, but if he does, he or maybe somebody in his staff knows that the business world in the United States has a big problem now, what Business Week calls a vexing problem. They have about $680 billion of liquid assets that they don't know what to do with. You know? And that's a vexing problem for companies like Intel and Ford and, you know, GE and a bunch of others that they list. So therefore, the solution is to free that. Apparently, that 2/3 of $1 trillion won't do for investment funds, so we have to give them some more money for investment funds. Meanwhile, cutting down food stamps for hungry children. You know, not if you ask the people know this, well, you know, it's pretty hard to answer. If they don't know it, it's even worse than if they do know it, because it is so obvious. It is so on the surface. You know, you don't have to look at any hidden document. You don't even have to bother reading below the headlines. You know, so yeah, if you want to know it, you know it. But I think the way you put the question is mistaken. At least I think, for the reasons I mentioned. They know it, and it doesn't make sense to ask them to join with other people to try to change it. They're the ones who are implementing it and benefiting it from it, not because they're bad people, because that's the way the institutions work. If they weren't doing it, somebody, it's like suppose you convinced the CEO of General Electric that he shouldn't be doing that. He should be a voice for the voiceless. He should be organizing in the slums. And suppose he agrees with you, said, okay, I'm going to organize in the slums. What happens to General Electric? Does it change? No. somebody else is appointed CEO, and it continues to increase profit and market share, because that's the institutional role in it. It's got to do that. So trying to convince these people, look, to go down to speak to Newt Gingrich and say, hey, look, here's what you're doing. He knows that. I mean, Newt Gingrich knows, certainly, that he holds the national championship in bringing federal subsidies to his rich constituents. He knows that. Certainly knows that, just as the editors of the New York Times know it. And they don't report it, but they know it. To be precise, he's actually third. For suburban counties in the country, the top federal subsidies go to Arlington, Virginia, which is part of Washington, so that's where the Pentagon is and so on. So it's part of the federal government. The second one is Brevard County, Florida, which is the home of the Kennedy Space Center, so that's part of the federal government. But as soon as you step out of the federal government, Cobb County, Georgia, is the chief recipient. And he's determined to make sure that his rich constituents keep in their cycle of dependency. He understands that. There's no point telling him. They can therefore talk about their conservative values and their entrepreneurial this and that while they're getting more federal subsidies than anyone else in the country. Okay. Now he knows that. There's no point going down and telling him. There's no point going to the newsroom of the editor of the New York Times, or for that matter the Star Tribune, and telling them, because they know it too. If they decide not to report it, that's their business, but they certainly know it. Okay. So what's the point of telling them? It's for precisely this reason that I think that the slogan of "Speak Truth to Power," though I admire the people, is the wrong idea. They're not the people to whom you want to speak truth, and in fact you don't want to speak to anyone. But that's not the way to direct one's actions. It's exactly the way that Rutilio Grande and Eugene Debs and Archbishop Romero and others were saying. That's the way to do it. It's the only way that's ever worked in history, by working with the powerless.